The Stellaris Combat Institute floated in the void between galaxies like a monument to cosmic overconfidence, a gleaming testament to the universe's ability to take itself far too seriously. Constructed from compressed neutronium and held together by gravitational fields that would make black holes envious, it represented the pinnacle of military education for species that had long ago transcended the need for things like physical laws and common sense. Director Colvex surveyed the latest crop of cadets with 4 of his 6 eyes while using the remaining 2 to simultaneously review budget reports and contemplate the existential futility of trying to teach warfare to beings who considered violence a form of interpretive dance. His chitinous exoskeleton shifted through colors that roughly translated to "Why did I choose education over a nice quiet career in asteroid mining?" The Veltai delegation stood in perfect formation, their bodies crackling with contained energy that could theoretically power small stars. Each one was a living plasma reactor wrapped in barely contained physics, capable of channeling forces that most civilizations worshipped as gods. They hummed with frequencies that made reality itself slightly uncomfortable. The Mokai representatives flowed rather than stewed, their shape-shifting forms cycling through configurations that hurt to look at directly. One moment they resembled crystalline spiders, the next they were geometric impossibilities that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. They communicated through controlled reality distortions that made nearby space-time hiccup apologetically. The collective drones maintained their characteristic telepathic silence, their hive mind processing tactical information across quantum networks that spanned galactic clusters. Each individual was simultaneously aware of every battle fought by their species over the past millennium, while computing probability matrices for conflicts that wouldn't occur for another 1,000 years. And then there was Cadet Maya Chen. The human sat in what could generously be called the back row. The row implied a level of organization that the other species had transcended sometime around the development of anti-gravity furniture. She occupied a chair, an actual, physical chair with legs and a back, because apparently humans required primitive support structures to prevent gravity from claiming them as another victim. Maya was taking notes. With a pen. An actual, honest to whatever deities were currently fashionable ballpoint pen that deposited colored liquid onto processed plant matter in patterns that somehow contained information. While her classmates interfaced directly with the quantum education matrix through neural implants that made their brains briefly indistinguishable from supercomputers, she moved her hand back and forth across paper like some kind of agricultural ancestor. The human appears to be experiencing technological regression, observed Cadet ZYXandra, her energy-based physiology flickering with what might have been concern if concern could be measured in terawatts. Should we contact the Primitive Species Rehabilitation Department? Director Colvex's remaining 4 arms performed a gesture that roughly translated to "Please don't make me fill out more paperwork." The Terran exchange program had seemed like such a good idea when the Galactic Advancement Council first proposed it. A gesture of interspecies cooperation, they said. An opportunity to study evolutionary development in real time, they said. What they hadn't mentioned was that humans came with an instruction manual written in a dead language and a tendency to ignore most of the instructions anyway. Humans required atmospheric gas mixtures that were considered toxic by most civilized species. They needed to consume organic matter on a regular basis instead of simply absorbing ambient energy from their environment. They slept for approximately 1/3 of their existence, during which time they became completely unconscious and vulnerable. A survival strategy so monumentally stupid that several xenobiologists had written papers questioning whether Earth was actually an elaborate practical joke. But the most baffling aspect of human behavior was their relationship with tools. While every other species in the galaxy had evolved beyond the need for primitive implements, humans remained stubbornly attached to physical objects. Maya's pen was a perfect example. A simple plastic tube containing colored liquid that served no purpose that couldn't be accomplished more efficiently through direct mental interface with information storage systems. Today, Director Colvex announced, his mandibles clicking in patterns that indicated he was about to deliver information of cosmic importance, "We will be conducting advanced threat assessment protocols. The Academy security systems will simulate various hostile scenarios, allowing you to demonstrate the tactical superiority that your species' evolution has provided." The Veltai began synchronizing their energy frequencies, creating harmonic resonances that could theoretically destabilize molecular bonds across several star systems. The Mokai shifted into combat configurations that existed in states of quantum superposition, simultaneously prepared for every possible threat while maintaining the ability to become any conceivable weapon. The collective drones linked their consciousness into a tactical network that processed battle strategies faster than light could travel between galaxies. Maya Chen clicked her pen and wrote Advanced Threat Day at the top of a new page, adding a small doodle of what might have been a smiling face or possibly a planetary explosion. With human artistic skills, it was often difficult to tell. That's when the universe decided to demonstrate its sense of humor. The alarms that began wailing weren't the polite chimes that indicated a scheduled drill, or even the urgent tones that suggested someone had accidentally divided by zero in the mathematics department. These were the kind of alarms that meant something had gone so catastrophically wrong that the Academy's AI had briefly considered filing a resignation letter with the cosmic authorities. Director Colvex's exoskeleton cycled through colors that didn't technically exist in normal spacetime, settling on a shade that roughly meant I should have listened to my mother and become an accountant. The Academy's central consciousness, a quantum entity called Nexus that had achieved enlightenment during the universe's awkward teenage years, materialized as a shifting pattern of concerned mathematics. Academy personnel, Nexus announced with the calm that comes from having witnessed the heat death of several pocket universes, we are experiencing a code Omega Absolute situation. Kythara hunting packs have breached the primary dimensional barriers. The word Kythara sent waves of existential dread through the assembled cadets that were visible to the naked eye. These weren't your average apex predators. They were apex predators that had achieved tenure. Entities from the spaces between spaces, where physics went to die and mathematics had nervous breakdowns. They stood 20 feet tall when they bothered to maintain consistent dimensional presence, possessed natural weapons that fired concentrated impossibility, and had reflexes that made causality look sluggish. Most terrifyingly, they hunted civilizations the way other species might hunt for lunch, not out of necessity, but for the intellectual satisfaction of solving particularly challenging puzzles. Military academies full of overconfident young beings who thought evolution made them invincible were considered gourmet entertainment. Lockdown protocols are now active, Nexus continued. All cadets will proceed to designated reality-stable zones and await extraction by emergency response teams who hopefully remember their dimensional anchor training. The Academy's corridors began shifting as defensive systems engaged, walls folding into configurations that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, while emergency lighting painted everything in colors that hurt to think about. Automated defense grids that had been designed to repel conventional threats activated with the confidence of engineers who had never actually met anything like the Kythara. The first defensive barrier lasted exactly long enough for someone to say, "Oh, that's not good," before being converted into a philosophical concept about the nature of failure. Through the Academy's reinforced observation portals, windows being far too primitive a term for barriers that filtered reality to make it safe for organic viewing, the cadets could see shapes moving in the corridors. Shapes that seemed to edit themselves out of direct observation, while simultaneously being impossible to ignore. Remarkable, Maya observed, making careful notes while her classmates experienced various forms of psychological trauma. They appear to exist in a state of quantum contradiction, simultaneously present and absent from our dimensional framework. This is hardly the time for academic documentation. Cadet Flux Omni protested, his shape-shifting form cycling through panic configurations at roughly the speed of light. We're about to be consumed by entities that treat reality as a suggestion. Well, yes, Maya agreed, but if we're going to be consumed, we might as well understand the process. It seems like valuable data for whoever finds our remains. The second defensive barrier managed to last 3 entire seconds, which was actually worse than the first because it gave everyone just enough time to hope before being disappointed by the universe's consistent lack of regard for their feelings. The defense grid is adapting, Nexus announced with the tone of someone trying to find the silver lining in a thermonuclear cloud. Each barrier is marginally more effective than the last. At this rate, Maya calculated, clicking her pen thoughtfully while sketching what appeared to be a tactical diagram or possibly a recipe for disaster, barrier number 63 should last almost 8 minutes. Unfortunately, we only have 7 barriers remaining, and basic mathematics suggests this presents a problem. The collective drones attempted their first counterattack, linking their hive mind into a tactical network that could process battle strategies across multiple probability matrices simultaneously. What they discovered sent their consciousness into recursive loops of existential horror that would require individual therapy for each member of their species. "They don't think," Node Prime whispered, his connection to the collective temporarily severed by the mental trauma. They solve. We are equations to them. Problems to be elegantly resolved." The Veltai delegation tried next, focusing their energy manipulation abilities into weapons that could theoretically restructure matter at the subatomic level. Their plasma-based attacks had once vaporized entire asteroid fields for fun. The Kythara absorbed their energy attacks like cosmic vitamins and politely thanked them for the meal. Cadet ZYX, whose energy manipulation abilities were legendary even among her naturally incandescent people, stepped forward with the kind of confidence that came from being made of controlled stellar fusion. She could maintain 47 distinct energy fields simultaneously while solving complex physics equations through pure thermodynamic calculation. She lasted approximately 4 seconds before her energy-based consciousness suffered what could politely be described as a complete format error. The Morkai made their attempt with characteristic shape-shifting versatility, cycling through combat forms that had been perfected over millions of years of evolutionary warfare. Cadet Flux Omni became a living weapon that existed in 17 different tactical configurations simultaneously. The Kythara studied his transformations with what might have been academic interest, then demonstrated their own shape-changing abilities by briefly becoming a mathematical proof that his existence was logically inconsistent. "Fascinating," Maya noted, clicking her pen again while adding detailed observations to her notebook. "They appear to be conducting some form of metatactical analysis, like researchers studying the effectiveness of different problem-solving approaches." Which was, unfortunately, exactly what they were doing. The Kythara had been observing the Academy for months, studying the species that the galaxy considered its most formidable warriors. They had analyzed the Veltai's energy manipulation, the Morkai's dimensional flexibility, and the collective's networked intelligence. They had developed countermeasures, evolutionary responses, and hunting strategies specifically calibrated to neutralize each threat with maximum intellectual satisfaction. What they hadn't anticipated was humans. Not because humans posed any particular danger. The Kythara's research had classified them somewhere between quaint curiosities and barely sentient furniture. But because human problem-solving methods were so fundamentally illogical that they fell outside all predictive frameworks. Consider Maya Chen, for instance. While every other cadet was either panicking, attempting to fight, or experiencing various stages of cognitive collapse, she was taking notes about them with a pen during an active hostile encounter. The lead Kythara paused outside the reality-stable zone, its multidimensional sensory apparatus analyzing the human's behavioral patterns. In its eons of hunting, it had encountered every possible response to imminent consumption: fear, rage, desperation, defiance, and occasionally acceptance. But clinical documentation? That was genuinely novel. Maya looked up from her notebook, meeting what might have been the creature's primary visual senses. "You know," she said conversationally, "your quantum contradiction field operates at a frequency that creates interesting interference patterns with standard ballpoint pen ink under normal atmospheric conditions." She clicked her pen demonstratively. The sound, a simple mechanical action that any human would recognize as unremarkable, struck the Kythara at precisely the wrong conceptual frequency. Their quantum contradiction field, calibrated to absorb and neutralize sophisticated energy-based attacks, suddenly found itself trying to process a phenomenon it had no framework for understanding. The result was educationally catastrophic. The lead Kythara's multidimensional existence began experiencing what could best be described as a logical stack overflow. Its quantum systems, evolved to handle impossibly complex reality manipulation, became completely overwhelmed trying to analyze the acoustic properties of a mass-produced writing implement that cost approximately 17 cents in Earth currency. "Oh," Maya said mildly, making another note. "That's actually quite unfortunate for them." The creature collapsed into a state that was simultaneously unconscious and logically inconsistent. The second Kythara, witnessing the impossible defeat of its pack leader, activated emergency protocols that had been hardwired into its species through millions of years of evolution in impossible spaces. It expanded its reality distortion field to maximum intensity and prepared to reduce this insignificant human to a small collection of confused atoms. Maya clicked her pen again. This time, she held it at a slightly different angle, creating a harmonic resonance between the mechanical clicking and the creature's dimensional manipulation systems. The interaction between primitive Earth engineering and advanced reality warping technology created a feedback loop that turned the Kythara's own impossibility field against its consciousness. The acoustic frequency appears to be universally problematic for their species, she observed, writing quickly while the second creature experienced what could generously be called an existential runtime error. Suggests a fundamental vulnerability in their quantum consciousness interface systems. The third Kythara, displaying the kind of adaptive intelligence that had made its species the terror of 17 different dimensional frameworks, immediately shut down all of its reality manipulation systems. It relied purely on its physical capabilities, strength, speed, and natural armor that could withstand the collapse of small universes. Maya looked at it thoughtfully, then removed the cap from her pen. "You know," she said, examining the ink cartridge with scientific curiosity, "this particular pen uses a standard blue ink formula, nothing exotic, just basic organic polymers and synthetic dyes. But when exposed to the kind of exotic matter that comprises your physical manifestation." She flicked a tiny drop of ink onto the creature's dimensional armor. The reaction was immediate and professionally embarrassing. The Kythara's quantum-stabilized form, evolved to exist simultaneously in multiple impossible states, suddenly found itself trying to process a substance that operated according to completely mundane chemical principles. The interaction between ordinary Earth chemistry and extraordinary alien physics violated several fundamental laws of reality. The creature didn't exactly die so much as experience a rapid and comprehensive failure of its existence protocols. "Remarkable," Maya murmured, making detailed notes about the interaction between terrestrial chemistry and multidimensional defensive systems. "I wonder if this principle would work on their ships." As if summoned by her academic curiosity, the fourth and final Kythara materialized in the doorway. This one was different, older, larger, and clearly the expedition leader. Its form bore the conceptual scars of 1,000 impossible hunts, and its presence suggested the kind of intelligence that came from successfully solving civilizations that most of its species considered theoretically interesting. It regarded the remains of its hunting pack, then focused its attention on the small human with the primitive writing implement, and produced a sound that might have been laughter if laughter could achieve tenure in advanced mathematics. "Ingenious little puzzle," it said in perfect galactic standard, though speaking seemed to cause it mild dimensional discomfort. "You have surprised us. This occurrence falls outside our probability matrices." "I imagine it would," Maya replied politely, "though I should mention that you're making a classic predator miscalculation." The creature's form shifted slightly, indicating curiosity. "Which would be?" "You're assuming I'm the puzzle to be solved." She clicked her pen one final time. But this click was different. Instead of the simple mechanical sound that had disrupted the others, this produced a complex acoustic sequence, the result of a slightly worn internal spring mechanism creating microvariations in frequency modulation. The sound pattern was completely random, entirely unpredictable, and absolutely impossible to defend against using logic. The expedition leader's sophisticated consciousness, evolved to process and solve any conceivable challenge, encountered something it had no conceptual framework for understanding, pure, random mechanical failure with no deeper meaning or purpose. The cognitive dissonance created by trying to analyze and respond to a genuinely meaningless sound caused a cascade failure in its problem-solving protocols. It stood there for a moment, its ancient intelligence trying to process the unprocessable, then quietly ceased to exist in the way that computers sometimes shut down when asked to calculate the square root of -1. "And that," Maya said, capping her pen with academic satisfaction, "is why you should never underestimate the problem-solving potential of random mechanical failure combined with completely ordinary chemistry." The Academy's reality-stable zone fell silent except for the sound of various alien species trying to process what they had just witnessed through their respective cognitive frameworks. The galaxy's most feared apex predators, entities that had terrorized civilizations across multiple dimensional planes, had been systematically defeated by a human cadet armed with a writing implement that probably required more sophisticated manufacturing techniques to produce than to operate. Director Colvex's exoskeleton had cycled through so many colors that it had achieved a pattern roughly translating to, "I should probably update my professional liability insurance." Nexus's quantum consciousness flickered with what might have been digital bewilderment. "Well," the AI announced, "that was academically significant." "I should probably document this properly," Maya said, flipping to a fresh page in her notebook. "Though I suspect the peer review process is going to be interesting." Cadet ZYXandra, her energy base form still flickering with harmonics of pure incomprehension, managed to stabilize enough to ask, "How did you determine that would be effective?" Maya shrugged with the casual confidence of someone who had just accidentally revolutionized military science. "I didn't, really. But they were obviously adapted to counter sophisticated threats, energy weapons, reality manipulation, quantum tactical networks. Nobody evolved countermeasures for random mechanical noise and ordinary chemistry, because they are not supposed to be threatening to anything more advanced than a paper airplane." She clicked her pen thoughtfully. Sometimes the most complex problems have embarrassingly simple solutions that nobody thinks to try because they seem too stupid to work. In the aftermath, as emergency response teams arrived to find for conceptually defeated Kythara and a group of cadets experiencing various forms of philosophical trauma, the incident was classified as a level Omega educational event. The official report described it as successful demonstration of unconventional tactical methodologies by Academy personnel, which was bureaucratic shorthand for "we have absolutely no idea what just happened, but everyone survived, so we're declaring victory." The pen itself was briefly confiscated for analysis by 17 different scientific institutions, though the research teams eventually concluded that it was, in fact, just a pen. A slightly worn, completely ordinary writing implement with no special properties beyond its ability to make clicking sounds when manipulated by humans who had learned to use tools before they learned to manipulate quantum probability fields. Maya got it back 6 weeks later, along with a commendation for innovative application of primitive technology in advanced tactical scenarios and a polite suggestion that she might want to consider a career in xenoarchaeology, where her appreciation for obsolete technology might prove valuable. She politely declined. After all, she still had 3 more years of academy training to complete, and her notebook was only halfway full of observations about the interesting ways that advanced civilizations could be defeated by things they considered beneath notice. Besides, she was curious to see what would happen if she brought a mechanical pencil to the next crisis simulation. The galaxy, it turned out, was a far more entertaining place when viewed from the perspective of someone who understood that sometimes the most sophisticated threats could be neutralized by the most unsophisticated solutions. And sometimes, the difference between predator and prey wasn't about evolution or advancement or superior technology. Sometimes it was just about having the right pen at the right time and the intellectual curiosity to click it when everyone else was trying to save the universe through quantum mechanics and dimensional manipulation. In his final report, Director Colvex noted that human cadets would require a complete revision of standard educational protocols. Not because they were particularly dangerous, but because their approach to problem-solving was so fundamentally different from established galactic methodology that existing pedagogical models couldn't account for their potential contributions to military science. It was, he reflected, either the most promising or the most terrifying development in galactic defense education in several millennia. Definitely both. After all, if a single human with a ballpoint pen could neutralize entities that treated reality as a rough suggestion, what would happen when Earth started sending them with entire office supply kits? The universe, Director Colvex decided, was going to need significantly more comprehensive insurance policies. And possibly a sense of humor, because apparently the cosmic joke was on everyone who thought evolution automatically meant improvement. Sometimes, it just meant learning to click pens at exactly the right moment.